Welcome. And my name is Laura Christensen. I'm the library director here at Thomas Balch Library. And we're very excited to welcome you for the orientation, volunteer orientation. So just a little backstory. I appreciate everyone responding to the doodle poll and the patience if you applied on the online application, especially if you applied a very long time ago. We went through a transition in the last year from our previous director retired after 20 years. I was appointed director. I had been the curator. We had to hire a curator. We also had to hire a cataloger this year. So within all of that transition, we didn't have that time to met with for the volunteer program. And we're hoping to relaunch it and to get back into having more regular orientation sessions and other things. So I do appreciate everyone's patience because I understand that some people applied a very long time ago. So I don't know how much you know about the Thomas Balch Library. A lot of people are familiar with us as Leesburg's library or as a history and genealogy library. We are owned by the town of Leesburg, long story. That makes us very unique as a special collections library in Virginia because we're not part of a university and we're also not part of a library system. So although we were formerly part of the Loudoun County Public Library System, we are no longer. We are a completely separate entity. We like them, but we're not part of them anymore. So our goal is what you would normally find in a local history room within a library system now, which is to preserve the local history of this place. But because we are in Leesburg and Loudoun County, which is an area that has both a diverse population currently and also in the past had lots of people come to Loudoun and then go somewhere else. We collect a lot of materials that are relevant to the country, to the world in terms of people helping people do their genealogy, but also the local history is tied into larger stories. So we do collect things they have to be flat. We collect flat things. That is the rule. We break it all the time. But we're looking for manuscripts, letters, photographs, maps, books. Books are flat. Sort of. Things that document Leesburg, Loudoun County, the people who've lived here, the activities they did, their culture, all of these things. And we are working on actually updating our mission statement. So, just to make sure. But what does that actually mean and what do we actually do? So basically, this is a place that we're here to bring people together in the past. So, and that can be their personal past, that can be their genealogical past, their family's past. That can be the past of the built environment around them. It can be their idea of the past. So we work with people who are engaged in creative pursuits, novel writing, things like that. But also it basically just means the physical media that document things that happened. So the thing that sets an archive and this archive apart from, say, a museum, things like that, is you can come in and say, hey, I feel like looking at something that's 200 years old today. And we will get something that's 200 years old and we'll hand it to you and be like, let's put it on the table. Don't write down it with a pen, knock yourself out. Be very careful. But the goal is that people can actually come in and touch the past and interact with it. To do that, we have to work very carefully with staff to mitigate the problems with the historic record. So things like decay, mold, fragile paper, and also increasingly just helping people interpret like how information was shared in the past, which is increasingly a lot different than how we do it today. I really had a lot of fun lately explaining phone books to people. It's my favorite thing. It's just like, yeah. They're like, you had to pay to get in there? And I'm like, no, you had to pay to get out. And they're like, how much did they cost? I'm like, they just showed up like mushrooms. It's just come up a lot. So we can pop upstairs later and do a really quick tour. But why are we here? Why are we called Thomas Balch Library? Who was Thomas Balch? So Thomas Balch is known as the father of international arbitration. However, we have nothing to do with that amazing and illustrious history of his. So he was involved in establishing mediation between other nations. So, like, so if we sink another nation's ship, we don't necessarily have to always go to war about it. That's basically what he was involved in. Our story with Thomas Balch starts when he was a very small child. So he was born in Leesburg. He lived there until he was 5. He, in that time, had the exciting opportunity in 1825 to meet the Marquis de Lafayette when he visited. More on that later. That meeting, though, as a small child, meeting this amazing hero of the American Revolution, inspired him to become a historian later in life. So he spent a lot of time writing and reading about history. He was very much into genealogy, as was most of the Balch family. And he wrote the first history of the role of the French in the American Revolution that was based on archives in France. So that was pretty exciting. Not what he like makes money doing, but who does? Fast forward after his death, a long time after his death, his 2 sons in 1918 were looking for a way to acknowledge their father, to celebrate his accomplishments, and they commissioned a bust of him, and they were hoping to find a home for it. So they were like, well, maybe we could put it in Leesburg. That's where he was born. That's his birthplace, even though he did very long. They approached Leesburg, and Leesburg, coincidentally at that time, was looking to build an actual library, which would not be in someone's living room or be a subscription library that you had to pay to maintain. So the 2 groups got together. The sons of Thomas Balch basically donated the funds to build the building that we're in now. It was, well, the building was, it would be if I was doing this as a tour. The main building that's at the front, it was completed in 1922, and it has been a library ever since. It's never been anything but a library. One thing that has also been a through line, the Balch brothers gave an endowment for the long-term maintenance of the library. It allows us to buy things like fixtures, lighting, shelving, things like that. It does not pay for collections, and it does not pay for staff, but it does maintain the building itself. However, it requires that we always have a history and genealogy component. And so although for most of the history from 1922 into 1974, 1994, the library was a public library that if you ask anyone around here, they'll probably, who's of a certain age, they'll have a story. There's like, I used to go there as a kid. I would sit in the red shag carpet, or I would check out videos in the basement. It was a regular library. It always had history and genealogy. So in the 90s, a wonderful thing happened. They built Russell Library in Ivy Park. And that is a more general library collection with lots of great space for teen books and kids books, and now it has a cool makerspace. And you can get your passport. But they thought at that point that this building was aging, and they thought they were probably going to close it down. So the public library system sort of messaged that. People did not like that in the community, because this has been a community center for its entire lifespan, and a wonderful space that people love to come to. So they petitioned the town of Leesburg to take the library over. At that point, they solidified a thing that had already been happening a bit, because the building was older, where this became just history and genealogy, and we don't do anything else in general. So we have operated as a sort of an independent special collections library since that time, although we're owned and operated by the town of Leesburg. Because we are not part of a library system, we do not get any funding from the state. And also we generally don't get any funding from the federal government. All of our funding comes from Leesburg. We do have a Friends of the Library organization that provides some support for the library. And about, it was like 10 years, I have to change what I'm saying. 10 years ago, they established an endowment for the library that is larger than that original gift of the Balch brothers. That lets us do things like purchase collections. It helped us provide seed money for our online catalog, which we launched in 2022 to celebrate the centennial for the library. So if you'd like to know more about the history of the library, because I just really left a lot of things out, just like a ton of things. We do have a centennial history, which tells you everything you would ever want to know, and more, and also whatever I got wrong. But also I welcome you to visit the library, and I'm not happy to show you guys upstairs briefly this evening. So that is a thumbnail sketch of what the library is and what we kind of do, but what do our volunteers do? So library volunteers are very important because we do have a relatively small staff. It doesn't sound small when I describe it, so get ready. We have 4 full-time staff and the library director, a cataloging librarian, a curator of manuscripts and archives, and a library genealogy specialist. And then we have about 10 flexible part-time staff. That's where it sounds like we have. But those people man our reference desk, and many of them only work, say, 4 hours a week or 2 hours a week. And many of them also work elsewhere. So we share them with other institutions. Volunteers, however, get the 14 people I've just described maintain the daily operations of the library. So our focus is generally on making sure the collections are available, making sure they're accessible, in good shape, and making sure that reference questions and inquiries get answered, hopefully, in a timely fashion. And that if you come in the library, we will find a pleasant experience, but also you were able to do what you came here to accomplish. Unfortunately, what that doesn't leave us time for is processing our backlog of collections and making more things available. So for a long time, like almost every library and archive exists, we have been accruing a backlog of unprocessed materials. On top of that, we've seen our accessions in terms of donations increasing, both in quantity and in quality, I think, but also in volume. So we get larger collections because they're modern records, and frankly, everybody had a copier and a printer and could just make a lot of copies of stuff. But we still also get historic collections that are more labor intensive. For a long time, we've had a struggle with space. We continue to have a struggle with space, and that our current building is very full. A lot of that is backlog. We recently have acquired an offsite storage space that will help a little bit with that. But the main thing that helps with that are wonderful volunteers. And the photo you see is the people who came to last year's volunteer lunch who were willing to be photographed, which is not all our volunteers. But they include both recent people who have joined the Corps, as well as some people who have been volunteering for, I think, like 30 to 35 years now, which is wonderful. And we have a mix of people, people who come in regularly, people who come in rarely, and then people who, just are here all the time. Frankly, we don't know what we don't need. They're very nice. But we do have some people who just came, but that is not the expectation. So volunteer work takes place in a couple of different places, and we're expanding that. So the vast majority takes place here at the library. And frankly, a lot of the volunteer work we'll be doing in the near future is going to take place in this room, which is our meeting room. However, we do have staff work areas also used for process. Some of it may take place at Donaldson Log Cabin, which if you are in Leesburg and you've never parked in the town parking garage, it's right there between the parking garage and the museum. This structure, a lot of people think is a museum gift shop because for a very long time it was the museum's gift shop. However, it is actually owned by the town of Leesburg, and the museum gave up its lease at some point. I don't know why. And the town turned it into office space. So it is a historic structure. Office space is a little bit glorified. If you haven't had the opportunity to go in the building, it's really interesting inside. It was a silversmith shop, so it has a forge, which means 90% of the interior is a fireplace. which was kind of fun. A few years ago, and we were looking for more workspace for processing, and the town offered it to us as we asked and they, which I'm sure why not. But it became a space that we also use for processing projects. So potentially that is a place that you might work on a project. It's very conveniently located to the parking garage. But also we usually walk over there. We do have digital options that are available. So if people are unable to come in on a regular basis, or you're just like, hey, I'd rather just do stuff in my house, we have transcription and indexing projects that we can provide remotely. We also have from time to time remote work with our oral history collections. And that can be like listening to an interview, time stamping when things happen. It can be checking transcripts. We're working with actually some AI to do automatic transcripting. So there'll be definitely some like listen and make sure that's what it actually said, because we learned that AI hallucinates if it hears a background noise, which is quite interesting. We also have this offsite storage space on Miller Drive, and our intention is not to have people working there on a regular basis in the near future, but in long term, we hope to establish a digitization lab and also possibly reservation / like book repair space there. So that would be definitely places that we would have volunteers work, but right now it's just an empty building with nothing in it. So TV. So really quickly, all of the tasks that we have for volunteers fit into the basic operations of a library. So they're involved in preservation, documenting, inventorying, arranging, doing research, and then describing items. So even if it's for genealogical purposes, or if it's in no way related to an archival collection, you're still doing these tasks. But it also says, tell people about it, because one of the best ways you can help the library is just be like, the Thomas Balch Library. You can go inside it. It exists. Because our number one problem is convincing people that you can just go. Also, it is generally pretty cold here, so you wear sweaters. It's a task. So what are these roles like, and what are the projects that we have coming up? So the number one thing that we do have volunteers work on is archival processing. So I don't know, just in the room, how much do you know about archival processing? Not much. Cool. You can learn. It's great. So I have slides for them. So the processing, basically, it's what in the field we call arrangement description. So it's basically taking materials from the way that we normally get them, which is generally in a disarranged state. So a big pile of stuff that maybe has been in the barn for a real long time. Reviewing it, figuring out if it had an order, or if we need to establish an order to it, establishing that order, and then describing it so people can discover that these things exist. One thing you hear a lot in stories about historians is, oh, they discovered this item in the archive. And it's like, well, yeah, but before they did that, an archivist or a volunteer saw it was there and described it so they could get to it. We just didn't make a big deal about it because it's fun. But a lot of the tasks we have are, we have this collection of things and we're going to go through it. If you'll take a look at what's here and observe, make a list, we'll talk about how we're going to arrange it. We'll arrange it, and then you'll create a guide so people can find what's in it. And that takes a bunch of different forms, but at the base level, that's basically everything we do here. The types of materials that we use really shape what that looks like. So we're talking about manuscripts and archives. Manuscripts are a large portion of our collection. Those are the things that we have that are unique. So that we have, there might be a photocopy of it somewhere, but we have the original thing and it's the only one that exists. And a lot of those things are individual or personal papers, family papers, things that a human being created. And it was usually from an interaction with another human being. So we do have, letters, diaries, memoirs, things like that are somebody's actual thoughts. We also have a lot of correspondence that is just like day-to-day stuff, which is great. The other side of things that we have are archives. And those are usually records that document activities of an entity. And it's in the field of archives, that's usually like a government or a business or something like that. But it doesn't have to be, and a lot of ours relate to like schools and clubs, things like the Rotary or the Ruritan or the ladies' board of the hospital or the guard. We have a lot of guard club records. Things that document what that organization did and the people who are involved in it. These things are more useful, though, than just documenting what that group did, because those groups existed in time and space, and so they describe what is happening around them. For instance, one thing that we recently found was a really great conversation that the Lovettsville Farmers Club had about bomb shelters during the invasion and things going on around that time, and they had some hot takes. But it's a really good way to encapsulate what local people thought about, major events. We also have things that don't fit into those two categories that volunteers work with. So special collections is just like everything else. Have rare book collections, lots of photographs. We have massive photograph collections. And then I mentioned our oral histories. We also have artwork, and despite that I said that we do not collect three-dimensional objects, we do all the time. And the joke with this is in these presentations. I will tell you what it is if you want. We do use our volunteers, though, largely to make things available more quickly. So a really great example is our visual collections catalog, and I'm not going to dive into it for time. But we normally catalog archival and manuscript collections as a group of papers. So you talk about this collection, but with our photographs, because we want people to find them, we catalog them individually. And almost every photograph, an intern or a volunteer or a staff member has spent time looking at it and describing it. So sometimes your descriptive powers are the most valuable if you can get the library. And if you go and kind of arrow through, you'll understand why, because many of the photos are amazing, but they're unidentified. So the only way to stumble upon is to be like, like this person lived in this street and they lived in a White House and they were a woman of this age. And if you have young woman in front of White House on Cornwall Street, it's worth looking at that photo. It might be somebody and you know who it is and you tell us and you know who the photo is, which is great. But that is a lot of what we do. So processing is basically taking the raw material, putting it in order and creating a description that's based on research. It's one of those things that doing is a lot easier than saying to see what it is, but literally you take a big mess and you take chaos and you create order. Unless the chaos was the order that the person who created it created, and we have to keep the chaos. So then you just document the chaos, which is also good. The other side of that, what follows that is telling people about it. So cataloging and indexing is another major part of our volunteer projects. And the ones that we're going to be working on in the near term are cataloging our newspaper collections for the most part. So in 2022, we launched a new catalog that was unique to the Thomas Balch Library. Previously, we were part of the Loudoun County Public Library's catalog, which was lovely. And we like them, again, besides how much we enjoy our partnerships with them. However, they did not catalog anything that was not a book. So that is the majority of our collection. So since 2022, we have been adding in all of the other to our catalog. And the last capstone of that are newspaper collections, which include historic newspapers like the Genius of Liberty, which cut off the TBL, which is a paper that was in Pittsburgh in it started in 1817, and it went through like 1835. We also have more ephemeral newspapers like the Chatterbox, which was Leesburg High School's newspaper. And then we have massive amounts of papers and records. So the Loudoun Times-Mirror is a paper record, and that's been published weekly for a very long time. Other papers like remember Leesburg today, or now is a newer one. We collect those actively, and what we help doing is going through the historic runs of the papers and collecting issue information. So we have volume 10, all of the issues this year. That is not the most glamorous job, but the upside is you get to look at lots of old papers. Very cool. Because it will include historic papers. It's not just modern. But that would be sort of collecting the information, catalogers take it and put it into the catalog record. So people can be specific. Yes, they have that exact issue. And which will save people a lot of time. So that goes into our online catalog, which if you have not explored it, please do. I will also say that anything that's processed gets a Find Me Later collection guide written. That is something volunteers help with. And those also go into the catalog. So there's work there to collect, subject headings. Missing slides. Yeah, right here going to, okay, that slide's out of place. Ignore it. Okay. All of the things end up being published more broadly. So other volunteer projects that we have going on, if you're interested in genealogical things, we have work to index collections so people can more quickly access genealogical data. If you have done genealogical research, I'm going to go on a limb and say that you've probably gone on ancestry.com or family search. And we provide access to databases like that, and they are very easy and wonderful to use. However, give you the idea that everything's online, that you hit a brick wall and run out of opportunities once you found them on the internet to solve that problem. The truth is there are vast amount of data, particularly genealogical data, that are still available and are not searchable in any way. So we have lots of projects helping, say, index the names on family charts, or doing a transcription of records in family Bibles so that you can actually know that these names exist here. And those are projects that will be both done here at the library, but also that we can make available remotely for people. So one thing that's very easy for us to provide access to remotely is document transcription. I know there are a lot of fun crowdsourcing projects out there. We do not have a crowdsourcing platform just yet. We might do that in the future. We tried it a little bit during the COVID shutdown and had some good results. But we just don't try to decide what we want to do there. However, we do have a lot of materials that can benefit from transcription. And we are working actively with some other projects that can benefit from the sort of close reading that you do during a transcription. For example, one of the items here is the Beard Family Ledger. That's the one that has the numbers kind of running down the side. This is a 18th and early 19th century ledger that records both what people purchased in a store and also their tolls that they paid. It includes people like James Monroe. He paid his tolls really regularly. But it also includes people who were, enslaved by those people or who were employed by those people who don't otherwise show up in records. So by transcribing this, we can bring those names to the front. We are working with Morgan Park and their 246 project to input data from records like this to help them build a body of data about enslaved people in Northern Virginia. I think they kind of broadened their scope beyond Loudon County in Northern Virginia now, but for our purposes, it's what we can contribute. So it is very useful. We also work with projects like the Center for Mason Legacies, which is doing research in records that George Mason University has, but they are researching individuals in a ledger from Loudon County. And so information that we can make available through transcription and indexing is very useful for things like that, where people are trying to identify people who maybe weren't the richest or the most prevalent, or who, unlike everybody else in the 19th century, did not sue their neighbors constantly. So they are underrepresented in the written record. It's just a great way to take information that's available and make it available. Plus, letters like the one that's pictured here on the right is a difficult read. It's a very squirrely, fancy person handwriting from the 19th century, but it is from one of the most gossipy correspondence I've ever encountered in all of my time as an archivist, which is more than 20 years. So it's well worth it. I won't tell you what she gets into. So we also have other opportunities. Now go back. And this slide has a painting of the Marquis of Lafayette that was created in 1825 in August during his visit here. So he was invited by James Monroe to visit Loudoun County, and the town fathers of Leesburg invited him to visit Leesburg. So he came to Leesburg on August 9th, paraded through the town, 8,000 to 10,000 people came out to see him. He went to the courthouse. There were speeches. Children did things, including Thomas Balch. And we're here this year at the bicentennial of this event. It's been 200 years since that happened. So we are making a big deal about it. And in addition to having exhibits here at the library, at the museum, and a lot of museum, Lafayette himself, or the reenactor who plays him, will be visiting Leesburg on August 9th and a James Monroe reenactor to recreate sort of their speeches and toasts. Coincidentally, this is also happening during the Taste of Leesburg Festival, which I don't know if you've ever been to that, but it's like 8,000 to 9,000 people come downtown for that. So perfect synergy with history. But we are somehow involved in coordinating advertising this in the 4th of July parade. So if you or anyone you know would like to be in the 4th of July parade, let me know. I'm looking for volunteers who would have to walk. It's a mile and it's 1.3 miles. It's July. It's a hard sell. But if you are interested, or if you know anyone, and I will, this is applicable to anyone over the age of 10 who is willing to be in a parade. Please let me know. I know it's like next week, so just about.
Yeah.
Okay. So things that are very important to know for volunteering is that the library hours are a little bit strange. We are Monday, Friday from 10 to 5, Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to 8. Those are our long days. Wednesdays, like today, we're open from 2 to 8, and then we are open on the weekends from 11 to 4 and from Sunday from 1 to 5. And because of security issues with building, things like that, any physical volunteering that is outside of very special events like 4th of July parades, which happen but rarely every 200 years. All volunteering happens during these hours. And so that is the time that is available for volunteering. And we do occasionally do things outside of these hours. For instance, we will have something like a Saturday morning before. But generally, these are the hours to be aware of for the volunteering. The bulk of volunteering does tend to happen during the week. That is when the majority of staff are here. It is not restricted to during the week. So I mentioned a little bit at the beginning that we are doing a little bit of a change in how we do this. So in the past, and still, you would be able to come in, see that slide's just really out of place. Like that. So in the past, you would be able to come in at the day of your choosing, and we would start you with whatever random task. We were like, do this. And our goal is to be more intentional and also to provide people with more opportunities to try different projects that you might want to work on, rather than you come in and you randomly get saddled with 5 boxes of wedding photos from the 60s through the 80s and you just hate weddings. Or similar things that have happened to people, like here's a box of postcards. Oh no, they're all clowns. Oh no, you're afraid of clowns. True story. So what we are doing is offering 4 main projects that we're going to start work on this summer. And we have set a time for the kickoff for the project. If you are able to come in during that time, you'll get an overview of what the plan is, and then guided instruction about how we're going to go about this. Like, for instance, on the 11th, I will be working the League of Women Voter Records. This is a collection that we have received that was in that stored in the garage sort of territory for a long time, so it needed some time to chill out and make sure it didn't bugs it. And our next step is to look at what's there and actually do an inventory, like high level inventories. How are these records organized? What is here? What are we going to maintain? What is there an order we need to keep? That sort of thing. So if you come in through, there's no way this collection will be finished between 9:30 and 12:30 on the one day. So if that appeals to you after the kickoff or at some point later, you could then schedule a time to come in and work on that project. And so it's just the kickoff is we're doing a focus. We're going to talk about how this works. So more people than just the archivist or the library director know what's going on with it. And then volunteers who find it interesting can continue to work until it's completed. Similarly, throughout July, we have other opportunities, including if working on archival records doesn't sound great, although League of Women Voters usually pretty sassy. We have our curator has a selection of family manuscript collections, which actually we have received a large number of very focused Leesburg-based collections of manuscripts, so letters, diaries, tax bills, lots of photographs. So that would be doing inventory and sorting. This is what's here, figuring out how to arrange it. And then we have 2 very good indexing projects. So one is working with our library genealogy specialist to work on making our family Bible records accessible. So we have a family Bible record collection. It's mostly photocopies. There are some original, don't picture yourself shopping around giant family Bibles. Although we have those if you're interested. This is a massive collection that was accrued over basically the library's entire history, duplicated information. At one point, it was indexed and the pages were numbered. However, something went wrong with the index at some point. So now in some of the boxes, if you are supposed to find something on page 12, it's not there. It might be on page 13 or 14, but sometimes it's not. So we have been re-indexing it and taking advantage of the first indexer did not try super hard to read the handwriting in these records. So we're making a more good faith effort to read the writing and also include all of the names that are present as opposed to just this was the Davis family Bible. So we're only going to say Davis, but there's more than just Davis. Yeah. And then finally in August, we're going to launch into have cataloging project with historic newspapers. And I think the first project will be to tackle the Valentine's Mirror and sort of just see what exactly issues we have in space. So one thing that makes this project particularly important is currently Valentine's Mirror does not have a digital component. It doesn't exist as digitized paper. It exists as microfilm. I have dreams that someday they will let us digitize it, but currently, no. So if it's not on the microfilm, you're out of luck currently. However, what we're learning is we may have the paper. The microfilm is not made from our papers, so we may have issues that don't appear on the microfilm or that are in poor condition. So it is an extremely helpful project, even though especially if you're nosy, you want to read old newspapers. They're really good. One time we found a story about a skeleton that was found on King Street in 1927, and they were super chill about it. They were just like, "Yeah, we found a skeleton. It's cool. It's behind the A&P drug." They're sort of like speculating about true crime stories. Who could this be? So how do you sign up for these things? One, I have doubts with the date, and I will email it to everybody who is listening to this recording. But you can just email us, or if you want to call, you can do that too. You can just say, "Hey, I plan to show up for the July 11th processing project." You can also just show up this year, it's okay. But it's nice if you let us know that you're coming, we'll tell you if we have to close for some reason. But again, if you forget, and you're like, "Oh, I still want to go to that," it's fine. And then after that, if you want to volunteer more regularly, is people like to do the same thing, like once a week, I come in for these hours, that is fine. And we can coordinate that. But what we want to do is start you off with a project. And if you cannot come for any of these times, that is okay too. You don't, just let me know. The other thing is, if you are interested in volunteering, but you're like, maybe like, I can't come in this summer because reasons, then we do have the digital projects that Tammy Tran, our curator, is preparing, which mostly right now document transcription. So if that's something that interests you, you can email us and say, "I'm interested in document transcription," and Tammy will get you started. And again, sorry, she's not here. So that is all of my terrible voice speaking. I don't sound like this much, I promise. But what questions do you have for me about volunteering?